Days after the attack, the penthouse no longer felt like a prison to Glorious. It was still dangerous, yes, filled with guards and shadowed by rivals who whispered her name as a target. But inside, something had changed. Beam Suk was no longer the untouchable Mafia boss who frightened her. He was the man who knelt before her in the rain, the man who bled to keep her safe, the man who whispered that she was the only thing making him human. And Glorious, against every warning in her heart, was beginning to believe it. One evening, she found him on the balcony, staring out at Seoul's glittering skyline. A glass of whiskey rested in his hand, untouched. His shoulders, always squared with power, looked strangely heavy. "You're thinking again," she said softly, stepping beside him. His lips twitched into the faintest smile. "You make it sound like a bad habit. Sometimes it is." She leaned on the railing, the night breeze teasing her braids. "What are you thinking about?" He turned to her, eyes shadowed but tender. "About what I'd do if I lost you." His voice dropped, rough and raw. "And how I wouldn't survive it." Her chest tightened. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. It was the first time she had touched him willingly. No force, no accident, no resistance. Just her. Beam Suk froze, staring at their joined hands as though he couldn't believe it. Slowly, he turned his palm upward, locking her fingers with his. His grip was strong, but not crushing. Protective. Reverent. "You don't have to survive it," she whispered, meeting his gaze. "Because you're not going to lose me." For a long moment, the city seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek with startling gentleness for a man who could pull a trigger without blinking. "Glorious," he breathed, as though her name itself was a prayer, and then his lips claimed hers. This kiss was nothing like the desperate ones before. It was slow, searching, reverent. A man tasting heaven for the first time and terrified it might vanish. Glorious melted into him, her arms circling his neck, her heart surrendering to the fire she had fought for so long. When they finally parted, breathless, Beam Suk rested his forehead against hers. "You've ruined me," he murmured with a faint, almost boyish smile. "And I don't care." Glorious laughed softly, her tears glistening in the city lights. "Maybe I was ruined the moment I kissed you in that alley." He tightened his hold, his voice steady and sure. "Then let's stay ruined. Together." The days after their first real kiss felt different. Beam Suk, who once moved like a storm, now lingered like a steady flame around Glorious. His world was still dark. Guns, suits, rival gangs. But with her, he was startlingly gentle, as if she were the only thing in life he couldn't afford to break. Glorious noticed it first in the small things. He started drinking less. The untouched glass of whiskey became a habit, abandoned whenever she sat beside him with her tea. He began reading English books with her, stumbling over words in his deep voice just to make her laugh. And sometimes, in the quiet hours of night, she woke to find him simply watching her sleep, his cold armor stripped away, his gaze soft and unguarded. One evening, he surprised her with something unexpected. "Get dressed," he said, standing in her doorway. "We're going out." She blinked. "Out? As in public?" A faint smirk tugged at his lips. "Don't worry. No guns tonight. Just us." He wasn't lying. For once, there were no black cars, no guards tailing them, just Beam Suk and Glorious, walking hand in hand through the crowded night markets of Seoul. The air smelled of roasted chestnuts and grilled skewers. Neon signs blinked overhead. Students laughed. Couples strolled. It was ordinary, and yet extraordinary. Glorious tugged him toward a street stall selling spicy rice cakes. He looked skeptical at first, but when she fed him a piece with chopsticks, his eyes widened. "Too hot," she teased. He coughed lightly, glaring at her with watery eyes. "You're trying to kill me." She laughed until her sides hurt, and to her shock, Beam Suk laughed too. A deep, unrestrained sound she had never heard from him before. People stared, not at the Mafia boss, but at a man grinning like he'd just discovered joy. Later, when the crowds thinned, He pulled her aside into a quiet alley lit only by a flickering lamp. He pressed her against the wall, but this time there was no danger in his touch, only yearning. "You've changed me," he whispered, his forehead against hers. "Do you know that? Before you, I only knew how to take it. But with you—" His lips brushed hers, tender, slow. "With you, I only want to give." Gloria's heart swelled painfully. She cupped his cheek, feeling the roughness of his skin beneath her palm. "Then give me this moment. No Mafia, no enemies, just you." And so he did. Under the hum of the Seoul night, Suk kissed her not as a boss, not as a man possessed by obsession, but as someone in love for the first time in his life. It was clumsy at moments, hesitant, like he was learning the language of tenderness. But it was real. When they finally pulled apart, she smiled softly. "See? You're not as scary as you think." His eyes shone with something that looked suspiciously like wonder. "Only because you're here to remind me I'm human." Back at the penthouse, life between Glorious and Suk settled into something fragile yet beautiful, like a flame sheltered against the wind. He no longer hovered at a distance. He sat with her during her study hours, sometimes dozing off with his head against her shoulder while she flipped through textbooks. He tried her cooking badly burned pancakes that still made him grin like it was the finest meal in Seoul. And in return, he let her see parts of himself no one else knew. Late one night, she found him in his office, staring at an old photograph tucked in his desk drawer. A little boy, bruised, unsmiling, standing in front of an orphanage gate. "That's you?" she whispered, stepping closer. Suk didn't hide it. His voice was low, steady. "The boy who learned the world doesn't love him. The boy who decided to become something the world feared instead." Her chest ached. Without thinking, she slipped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "You're not that boy anymore," she murmured. "You don't have to be." For a moment he stood frozen. Then his hand covered hers, holding tight, as if her touch tethered him to life itself. That night, he didn't kiss her with fire. He kissed her with quiet reverence, as if memorizing her breath, her warmth, her very existence. They ended up curled together on the couch, her head resting on his chest, his arm draped protectively around her. The city lights spilled through the glass walls, but inside, it felt like the world had shrunk to just the two of them. "Do you know what you've done to me?" he asked softly, brushing her hair from her face. Gloria smiled faintly, half asleep. "You tell me every day." "No," he whispered, kissing her forehead. "Not enough. You've given me something I thought I'd never have." Her eyes fluttered open. "What's that?" He held her closer, his voice trembling in the rarest way. "Peace." Gloria's heart swelled until it hurt. She lifted her face and kissed him again. Not fierce, not rushed, but slow and lingering, a promise sealed in silence. For the first time since she'd met him, Suk fell asleep with no nightmares, no demons clawing at his mind, just her heartbeat beneath his hand. And for the first time since coming to Korea, Glorious didn't feel like a girl lost in a foreign city. She felt at home, home in his arms. The city outside never stopped moving, but inside the penthouse, everything slowed. After weeks of stolen kisses, unspoken words, and the storm of danger that bound them together, Glorious and Suk finally stood face to face with no walls left between them. It was late, the kind of late when silence pressed against the windows and the world seemed far away. Glorious had been reading, her head bent over a book, when she realized he was watching her again. Not with his usual intensity, but with something softer. "What?" she asked, pretending to focus on the page. Suk leaned back in his chair, his lips tugging faintly upward. "I'm trying to understand how someone like you ended up with someone like me." She closed the book gently, her heartbeat quickening. "Maybe you're not giving yourself enough credit." He chuckled, low and husky, before standing and crossing the room. When he stopped in front of her, his shadow fell across her lap. He reached down, tracing a strand of her hair between his fingers. "You've seen the worst of me," he murmured. The blood, the darkness, and yet you're still here. His thumb brushed her cheek, lingering. Tell me why. Her breath caught, but her answer was simple. Because I see more than what the world sees. I see the man who laughs at burnt pancakes. The man who watches over me like I'm the only thing that matters. The man who thinks he's a monster but still carries a boy's wounds in his heart. For a long moment his eyes searched hers. Then he whispered, almost breaking, "Glorious." When he kissed her, it wasn't desperate this time. It was slow, reverent, a question asked and answered in silence. She melted against him, her arms winding around his neck as if they had always belonged there. The kiss deepened, growing hungrier, yet threaded with tenderness. His hands, usually so commanding, trembled slightly as they held her, as though he was afraid she might vanish. "Tell me to stop," he breathed against her lips. "If I keep going, I won't be able to." Her reply was steady, though her heart pounded. "Don't stop." That was all it took. The night unfolded not with the rush of obsession, but with the gentleness of two people finally choosing each other. Every touch was careful. Every kiss was deliberate. Every moment a surrender of walls they had both built too high. By the time dawn painted Seoul in soft gold, Glorious lay in his arms, her head resting against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. Beam Suk pressed a kiss to her hair, whispering words he had never spoken to anyone. "You're not just mine anymore, Glorious. I'm yours too." And for the first time, Glorious didn't feel afraid of what they had become, because this wasn't fire consuming her. It was love, fierce, dangerous, and achingly beautiful. The morning after felt different. Glorious woke first, sunlight spilling through the wide glass windows. She turned her head to see Beam Suk sleeping peacefully beside her. The same man feared across Seoul, now vulnerable, his features softened in rest. She reached out, brushing his hair back gently. He stirred, eyes fluttering open, and for once, he didn't wear his armor of indifference. Instead, he smiled, a rare, unguarded smile that made her heart race. "Morning," he rasped, voice low and warm. "Morning," she whispered back, cheeks flushing. For a moment, they just stayed like that, tangled in sheets and sunlight. Then, to her surprise, Beam Suk shifted closer and tucked her into his arms. He kissed her temple lazily, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. "You know," he murmured against her skin, "I've spent years thinking love was weakness, something that could be used against me. But with you, it feels like strength." Her chest swelled with warmth. She traced small circles on his chest. "That's because it is. Love isn't a chain, Beam Suk. It's wings." His arms tightened around her. "Then don't ever let go of me, Glorious. Because I don't think I can survive without those wings anymore." Their days changed quietly after that. Beam Suk, who had once lived in the shadows, found himself craving ordinary moments with her. He insisted on walking her to her university classes, his presence so intimidating that other students cleared the way. Yet, when she blushed and scolded him for being overprotective, he only smirked and slipped his hand into hers. At night, instead of endless meetings with his men, he spent hours in the kitchen with her, failing miserably at chopping vegetables, but grinning every time she laughed at him. And Glorious, who had once felt small in the vastness of Korea, found her world colored by him. She caught herself humming when he texted her little reminders. "Eat before class. Don't stay up too late. You belong to me, don't forget that." Every gesture, every touch, carried a tenderness that no one believed Beam Suk capable of. But with Glorious, he was no longer the Mafia boss the world feared. He was simply a man in love. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the city lights, Glorious leaned her head against his shoulder. "You know," she said softly, "I used to dream about love stories in books, but this is better." Beam Suk tilted his head, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Because it's real?" She nodded. "Because it's ours." He slipped a ring, simple, silver, yet beautiful, onto her finger without warning. Her breath caught. Beam Suk. He didn't kneel, didn't give a grand speech. He just held her hand, his gaze steady and vulnerable. No matter what comes, you're mine, and I'm yours. That's the only promise I know how to make. Tears welled in her eyes as she kissed him, her heart bursting with certainty. This wasn't just love born of obsession anymore. It was a forever kind of love. The world outside remained dangerous, filled with enemies and shadows. But inside their little world, Beam Suk and Glorious had built something unshakable. After slipping that silver ring onto her finger, Beam Suk never let go of her hand again. Not in public, not grand declarations. Just the two of them boarding a flight, hand in hand, hearts steady. They settled by the sea, far from mafia wars and endless in private, not even when storms of violence threatened around them. His men noticed the change. Their ruthless leader softened only for her. And Glorious noticed too. The boy inside him, long buried beneath scars, was finally breathing again. Weeks later, they left Seoul quietly. No headlines, no bloodshed. Beam Suk traded meetings in smoke-filled rooms for mornings spent cooking breakfast with Glorious, laughter spilling into sunlit kitchens. She continued her studies, her books now filled with scribbled notes he left inside, little reminders of his love, clumsy but sweet. And every evening, as the waves crashed against the shore, he held her close, whispering the words he once thought he'd never be able to say. I love you, Glorious, not with obsession, not with fear, but with everything I am. She always answered with the same soft smile, pressing her lips to his. And I love you, Beam Suk, enough to heal every scar you carry. They married quietly one spring morning, with only the sea as their witness. No suits, no gowns, just two souls vowing forever under the rising sun. And in that moment, the feared mafia boss was no longer a man of shadows. He was simply hers. Glorious had tamed the storm. Beam Suk had found his peace. And together they had discovered the rarest love of all, the kind that lasts forever. Marriage didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the beginning of a gentler chapter neither of them had ever dreamed they would live. In their seaside home, mornings began with Beam Suk waking before Glorious. He would watch her sleep, sunlight brushing her face, and marvel at how someone so fierce, so tender, had chosen him. When she stirred, he always greeted her with a kiss on her forehead and the same words, whispered like a vow. Good morning, my heart. Glorious, in return, filled his days with warmth. She filled their walls with laughter, their table with meals he often ruined but always tried to help with, and their nights with a kind of closeness that healed the deepest parts of him. Sometimes, they would walk along the shore hand in hand, their footprints fading into the sand. She would point out seashells. He would listen, not caring about shells at all, but about the joy in her voice. And sometimes, when the sky turned crimson at sunset, he would wrap his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. Do you ever regret it? He would ask softly. Regret what? Choosing me, loving me. Her answer never changed. She would turn, kiss him with all the certainty in her heart, and whisper, Beam Suk, you're the best choice I ever made. Seasons passed, but their love only grew stronger. Beam Suk, once feared for his coldness, learned the sweetness of vulnerability. Glorious, once a student lost in a foreign land, found her forever home in his arms. One spring evening, as cherry blossoms drifted in the air, they sat on their porch with the sea before them. Glorious leaned against his chest, their fingers entwined. Do you know what we've become? She asked with a smile. He kissed her hair, his voice steady and sure. What? A love story. The kind people don't believe exists. But it's ours. Beam Suk pressed his lips to her hand, his eyes soft. Then let's keep writing it. For the rest of our lives. And with the stars above and the sea before them, they sealed that promise. In every kiss, in every touch, in every quiet moment that followed. Because theirs was not just a love born from chaos. It was a love that bloomed forever. Years passed, but the fire between them never dimmed. Their seaside home had grown warmer with time, its walls filled with framed photos of stolen kisses, silly moments, and handwritten notes Beam Suk had slipped into glorious textbooks long ago. But the most precious sound in their house was new, the laughter of a little girl with her mother's bright eyes and her father's stubborn pout. Beam Suk adored her in a way that shocked even himself. The man once feared across Seoul now spent mornings chasing their daughter barefoot across the garden, letting her climb onto his shoulders like he was her personal playground. And Glorious would stand by the doorway, her heart swelling as she watched him. The Mafia boss turned husband, turned father, softened completely by love. One evening, after putting their daughter to sleep, Beam Suk found Glorious on the balcony, gazing at the moonlit sea. He slid his arms around her waist from behind, pulling her close. "Tired?" he whispered against her neck. She leaned into him with a soft smile. "Happy?" he kissed her cheek. "You've given me more than I ever thought I deserved." She turned in his arms, cupping his face gently. "Beam Suk, don't you see? You were never undeserving. You just needed someone to remind you what love felt like." His eyes glistened, and without another word, he kissed her, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that carried years of devotion. Later, when the house was quiet and only the sound of waves filled the night, they lay tangled together, their fingers interlaced. "Do you remember," Glorious whispered, "the first time you kissed me? You were so cold, so untouchable. And now look at you." Beam Suk chuckled slowly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Now I can't go a single day without you. You've ruined me, Glorious." She laughed softly. "No, I've completed you." And in the quiet of that night, with their love wrapped around them like the ocean's tide, Beam Suk finally understood. This was what forever truly meant. Not just passion, not just survival, but choosing each other every day in every way for the rest of their lives. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment. Also like, share, and subscribe to my channel and click on the notification icon so that you will get notified whenever a new story is uploaded.